The morning sun streamed through the windows of Grind Coffee House as Zoe Martinez wiped down tables with mechanical precision. Her paint-stained apron told the story of her real passion, but the empty bank account in her wallet told the story of her reality. 3 months behind on rent, student loans breathing down her neck, and her art career moving at the speed of molasses in winter. She glanced at the clock. 2 more hours until her shift ended. Then she could return to her cramped studio apartment and lose herself in canvas and color. It was the only thing that made sense anymore. The bell above the door chimed, and Zoe looked up to see a man in an expensive suit pacing near the entrance, phone pressed to his ear. His dark hair was perfectly styled, his jaw clean-shaven, and everything about him screamed money and success. He was exactly the type of customer who ordered complicated drinks and left minimal tips. "James, I need a solution, not another problem," the man was saying, his voice tight with frustration. "The gala is tonight, and if I show up alone, my mother will have Rebecca Sterling practically walking me down the aisle before dessert is served." Zoe tried not to eavesdrop, but the coffee shop was small, and his voice carried. She continued wiping tables, moving closer despite herself. "No, I can't just hire an escort. This is my mother we're talking about. She has the investigative skills of a private detective and the social connections to destroy my reputation if she finds out." He paused, running his free hand through his hair. "What I need is someone real, someone believable, someone who can convince her that I'm in a serious relationship." The man, apparently named Ethan, based on what she'd overheard, ended the call with an exasperated sigh. He stood there for a moment, staring at his phone like it might offer solutions, then headed toward the counter. Zoe quickly moved behind the register, putting on her best customer service smile. "Good morning. What can I get started for you?" Ethan looked up, and for a moment, their eyes met. His were a striking green, currently clouded with stress and something that looked like desperation. "Large coffee, black, and make it strong enough to solve life problems." Despite everything, Zoe smiled genuinely. "I wish coffee could do that. Life would be much simpler. Wouldn't it just?" he muttered, pulling out his wallet. As he did, his phone slipped from his hand and clattered to the floor. They both reached for it at the same time. Their heads collided with a soft thump. Zoe stumbled backward, knocking over a display of travel mugs that cascaded to the floor with a tremendous crash. "Oh no, I'm so sorry," Zoe gasped, dropping to her knees to gather the scattered mugs. "It's my fault," Ethan said, joining her on the floor. "I'm not usually this clumsy. It's just been one of those mornings where everything goes wrong." Their hands touched as they reached for the same mug, and Zoe felt an unexpected spark of electricity. She looked up to find him watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "You're an artist," he said suddenly. Zoe glanced down at her paint-stained hands. It's guilty, though apparently not a very successful one, considering I'm here instead of in a gallery somewhere. "What kind of art?" "Portraits, mostly. I try to capture the real person behind the mask everyone wears." She gestured vaguely at the coffee shop around them. "This just pays the bills. Barely." Ethan was quiet for a moment, studying her face with an intensity that made her nervous. Then, as if making a decision, he stood and extended his hand to help her up. "I have a proposition for you," he said, an offer she couldn't refuse. Zoe raised an eyebrow, still holding a handful of travel mugs. "If this is going where I think it's going, I should mention that I'm not that kind of barista." Ethan laughed, and the sound transformed his entire face. "Nothing like that. I need someone to pretend to be my girlfriend for one evening. One night, a few hours at most, and I'll pay you $5,000. Zoe nearly dropped the mugs again. "I'm sorry, what?" "I know how it sounds, but hear me out." Ethan glanced around the coffee shop, which was thankfully empty, except for an elderly man reading a newspaper in the corner. "My mother is hosting a charity gala tonight. She's been trying to set me up with this woman, Rebecca Sterling, for months. If I show up alone, she'll corner me into some kind of engagement announcement before the night is over. And you don't want to marry this Rebecca person? Rebecca is lovely, but she's not for me. The problem is, my mother doesn't take no for an answer. She thinks I'm just being difficult, that I don't know what's good for me." Ethan's expression darkened. "She's already told people that Rebecca and I are practically engaged. If I can't prove that I'm serious about someone else, she'll make good on that assumption. Zoe set the mugs on the counter, trying to process what she was hearing. So you want me to pretend to be your girlfriend? To get your mother off your back? Exactly. You'd be my date to the gala? We'd act like a couple in love? And afterward, we go our separate ways. Simple. Simple, Zoe repeated. Right, and what happens when your mother wants to see this mysterious girlfriend again? I'll figure that out later. Right now, I just need to get through tonight. Ethan pulled out his phone and showed her a photo of an elegant ballroom filled with well-dressed people. This is what we're talking about. High society, lots of witnesses, very public. One night of playing the part of someone who could actually love me, and you walk away with enough money to pay your rent for months? Zoe stared at the photo, her mind racing. $5,000 was more money than she'd seen in one place since college. It would cover her rent, her student loan payment, and leave enough left over to focus on her art without worrying about survival. Why me? She asked. I mean, you could probably find someone more suitable. Someone who actually knows how to act in high society. That's exactly why I need you, Ethan said earnestly. You're real. You don't have an agenda. You're not trying to climb the social ladder. And you won't expect this to turn into something it's not. Plus, you understand people well enough to paint their portraits. That means you can read a room, adapt to situations. Zoe looked down at her paint-stained apron, then back at Ethan's perfectly pressed suit. I don't exactly have gala-appropriate clothing. That's not a problem. I can arrange for a stylist, hair, makeup, whatever you need. Ethan stepped closer, his voice dropping to an urgent whisper. Look, I know this is crazy. I know I'm asking a lot, but I'm desperate here. My mother doesn't. Just control my personal life. She has significant influence over my business. If she decides I'm not making good decisions in my personal life, she might start questioning my professional judgment too. What kind of business? Tech startup. We're developing software for sustainable energy management. It's important work, and I can't let family drama derail it. Ethan pulled out his business card and handed it to her. Ethan Blake, CEO of GreenLogic Solutions. Zoe recognized the name. GreenLogic had been featured in several tech magazines lately, praised for their innovative approach to reducing corporate energy waste. This wasn't some trust fund baby playing entrepreneur. This was someone actually making a difference. One night, she said slowly. One night. And afterward, we never see each other again? Never, Ethan confirmed, though something flickered across his face as he said it. Zoe looked around the coffee shop, at the minimum wage job that barely kept her afloat, at the dreams that seemed to get further away every day. Then she looked at Ethan, this stranger who was offering her a way out, even if it was temporary. Okay, she heard herself say. I'll do it. Preparing for the performance 3 hours later, Zoe found herself in an upscale salon in Manhattan, staring at her reflection in disbelief. The woman looking back at her bore little resemblance to the paint-splattered barista from that morning. Her curly brown hair had been tamed into an elegant updo. Her makeup was flawless, but natural-looking. She was wearing a dress that probably cost more than her monthly rent. The dress was a deep emerald green that brought out her eyes, fitted perfectly to her curves without being inappropriate. The stylist, a sharp-eyed woman named Claire, had taken one look at Zoe and declared her a natural beauty who just needed the right presentation. You clean up nice, came a voice from behind her. Zoe turned to see Ethan standing in the salon's waiting area. Her breath caught. If she had thought he looked good in a business suit, he was absolutely devastating in a tuxedo. The black fabric was perfectly tailored to his tall, lean frame, and he'd traded his earlier stressed expression for one of genuine admiration. You don't look so bad yourself, Zoe managed, smoothing down the dress nervously. Nervous? Ethan asked, offering her his arm. Terrified, Zoe admitted. I've never been to anything fancier than my college roommate's wedding, and that was at a community center. You'll be fine, just remember, we're supposed to be in love. That means lots of eye contact, casual touches, inside jokes. Ethan paused. Actually, we should probably establish some basic facts about our relationship. How long have we been dating? As they walked toward the waiting car, Zoe felt the reality of what she was doing settle over her like a weight. How about 6 months? Long enough to be serious, not so long that people expect us to be talking about marriage. Good thinking. Where did we meet? At a gallery opening. You were there for business. I was there hoping to network. You spilled wine on my dress. Ethan smiled. And I offered to pay for the cleaning, but you said you'd rather I bought you dinner instead. See, you're getting the hang of this already? The car ride to the gala was filled with rapid-fire questions and answers as they built their fictional relationship. Zoe found herself impressed by Ethan's quick thinking and attention to detail. He wasn't just throwing money at a problem. He was approaching this like a business strategy, which oddly made her feel more confident. One more thing, Ethan said as they pulled up to the hotel hosting the gala. My mother can be intense. She's going to ask you a lot of personal questions. Try to find inconsistencies in our story. Don't take it personally. She does this too. Everyone? What's she like? Brilliant, driven, completely terrifying when she wants to be. Ethan's expression softened slightly. She means well, in her own way. She just has very specific ideas about how my life should go. The car stopped, and Zoe could see photographers gathered outside the hotel entrance. Flashbulbs already popping. As other guests arrived, her stomach lurched. There are photographers, she said weakly. Just smile and stay close to me, Ethan reassured her. This is just another role to play, like acting in a school play. As they stepped out of the car, Zoe felt the attention immediately. Heads turned, cameras flashed, and she heard murmurs from the small crowd of onlookers. Ethan's hand was warm and steady on her back as he guided her up the red carpet. Ethan. Blake, good to see you, called one of the photographers. Who's your lovely companion? This is Zoe Martinez, Ethan replied smoothly, his arm sliding around her waist. My girlfriend. Managed to smile in a small wave, trying to channel every confident woman she'd ever admired. Beside her, Ethan was the picture of a man in love, looking down at her with such convincing adoration that, for a moment, she almost believed it herself. They made it through the photo line and into the hotel lobby, where the real test awaited. The ballroom was even more impressive in person, filled with the kind of people Zoe had only seen in magazines. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over the crowd, and the sound of refined conversation and clinking glasses filled the air. There she is, Ethan murmured, and Zoe followed his gaze to see an elegant woman in her 50s approaching them with the focused intensity of a predator who had spotted her prey. Ethan, darling, the woman said, air kissing his cheeks, before turning her sharp blue eyes to Zoe. And this must be the young woman we've heard absolutely nothing about. Mother, I'd like you to meet Zoe Martinez, Ethan said, his hand tightening slightly on Zoe's waist. Zoe, this is my mother, Victoria Blake. Victoria extended a perfectly manicured hand, and Zoe shook it, trying to project confidence she didn't feel. It's wonderful to meet you, Mrs. Blake, Zoe said. Ethan talks about you all the time, does he? Victoria's smile was razor sharp. How interesting. And what is it you do, Miss Martinez? I'm an artist, Zoe replied, the truth feeling strange in this setting. I specialize in portraiture. How bohemian, Victoria said, and Zoe couldn't tell if it was meant as a compliment or an insult. And how did you meet my son? This was it, the first real test of their story. Zoe looked up at Ethan, allowing a genuine smile to cross her face. As she remembered their fictional meet-cute, at a gallery opening 6 months ago, she said. He spilled wine all over my favorite dress. And ruined what was supposed to be an important networking opportunity, Ethan added, playing his part perfectly. I felt so terrible that I insisted on making it up to her. So, you bought her a new dress? Victoria asked. Better, Zoe said, reaching up to touch Ethan's cheek in what she hoped looked like a loving gesture. He bought me dinner and listened to me complain about pretentious art critics for 3 hours. Most people's eyes glaze over after 5 minutes. And you found this charming? Victoria addressed Ethan. I found her passionate, Ethan replied, and something in his voice made Zoe look at him sharply. She cares deeply about her work, about truth and authenticity. It's refreshing in a world full of people who say what they think you want to hear. For a moment, Victoria said nothing, studying them both with those sharp blue eyes. Then she smiled, and it was like the sun coming out from behind clouds. Well then, she said, simply must introduce you to some people. Margaret Whitfield is here tonight. She's quite the art collector. I'm sure she'd love to meet you, Zoe. As Victoria led them deeper into the crowd, Zoe felt a mixture of relief and growing dread. They had passed the first test, but something told her the night was just beginning. And despite her best efforts to remember that this was all pretend, she couldn't shake the feeling that with every passing moment, the line between fiction and reality was becoming dangerously blurred. The game had begun, and Zoe was no longer. Sure, she knew the rules. Dancing on dangerous ground, the ballroom sparkled like a constellation brought to earth. And Zoe found herself swept into a world she had only imagined. Crystal glasses chimed softly as servers glided between guests, offering champagne and delicate hors d'oeuvres that looked more like tiny works of art than food. The air hummed with polite conversation, designer perfumes, and the underlying tension of social positioning. Ethan's hand remained steady at the small of her back as Victoria guided them through the crowd, making introductions with surgical precision. Each person they met seemed to represent a different piece of some larger puzzle, and Zoe began to understand that this wasn't just a charity gala. It was a carefully orchestrated social chess match. Margaret, darling, Victoria called to an elegant woman in her 60s wearing what appeared to be a vintage Chanel suit. "I want you to meet someone special." Margaret Whitfield turned, and Zoe immediately recognized the sharp intelligence in her eyes. This was a woman who had built an empire through careful observation and calculated risks. "Margaret, this is my son's girlfriend, Zoe Martinez. She's an artist," Victoria said, and Zoe caught the subtle emphasis on the word artist that suggested it might as well have been alien life form. "How wonderful," Margaret said, extending her hand. "What medium do you work in?" "Primarily oils," Zoe replied, grateful to be discussing something she actually knew. "I focus on portraiture, trying to capture the authentic person beneath the social mask." Margaret's eyebrows rose slightly. "How fascinating. And do you find that people prefer their authentic selves to be revealed, or do they commission you hoping you'll paint the mask instead?" The question was more perceptive than Zoe had expected, and she felt Ethan's attention sharpen beside her. "That's the eternal struggle," she admitted. "Most people hire a portrait artist because they want to be seen as they imagine themselves to be. But the interesting art happens when you find ways to show both the aspiration and the truth." "Show me what you see when you look at me," Margaret challenged. Zoe studied Margaret's face, noting the confident set of her shoulders, the slight tension around her eyes, the way she held her champagne glass like a shield. "I see someone who's spent decades proving she belongs in rooms like this, but who still feels like she's being tested. Someone who's built something impressive, but worries it could all disappear if she lets her guard down for even a moment." Silence that followed felt eternal. Then Margaret threw back her head and laughed, a genuine sound that drew curious glances from nearby guests. "My dear, you're either remarkably perceptive or you've done your research," Margaret said. "Either way, I'm impressed. Do you have a card?" Zoe's heart sank. She hadn't thought to bring business cards to a fake date. "I'm actually between cards." "At the moment," she said, hoping it sounded professional rather than broke. "No matter," Margaret said, pulling out her phone. "Give me your number. I have a commission that might interest you." As Zoe rattled off her number, she caught Ethan watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. There was pride there, but also something that looked almost like surprise, as if he was seeing her differently than he had that morning. "You're full of surprises," he murmured, as Margaret moved away to greet other guests. "Good surprises or bad surprises?" "The dangerous kind," Ethan said, and something in his voice made her pulse quicken. Before she could ask what he meant, Victoria reappeared at their sides with a tall, blonde woman who could have stepped off the cover of a fashion magazine. "Look who I found," Victoria said, with a kind of smile that made Zoe's stomach clench. "Rebecca was just asking about you." Rebecca Sterling was everything Zoe wasn't. Tall where Zoe was average height, blonde where Zoe was brunette, and so perfectly put together that she seemed to glow from within. Her dress was understated but clearly expensive, and she moved with the kind of confidence that came from never having to worry about rent money. "Hello, Ethan," Rebecca said, her voice warm and cultured. "Mother told me you'd be here tonight." She turned to Zoe with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. And you must be the new girlfriend I've been hearing about. Zoe Martinez, Zoe said, extending her hand and trying to project confidence she didn't feel. Rebecca Sterling, came the reply, along with a handshake that lingered just long enough to feel like a power play. I was just telling Victoria how curious I was to meet the woman who finally captured Ethan's attention. It's been quite the bachelor for as long as I've known him. Well, when you know what you're looking for, you don't settle for less, Zoe said smoothly, surprised by her own boldness. How romantic, Rebecca said. And what is it you do, Zoe? She's an artist, Ethan interjected, his arm tightening around Zoe's waist. An incredibly talented one. She sees things in people that others miss. How interesting, Rebecca said. I've always found artists to be such free spirits, so unconcerned with practical matters. The comment was delivered with a smile, but Zoe heard the barb underneath. Rebecca was establishing territory, making it clear that she represented stability and status, while Zoe was just a bohemian phase. I think practicality is overrated, Zoe replied. Some of the most important things in life can't be measured in spreadsheets. How true, Rebecca agreed, though I suppose someone has to handle the spreadsheets while others pursue their passions. Tension was becoming palpable, and Zoe could see Victoria watching the exchange with obvious interest. This was exactly what Ethan's mother had wanted, a direct comparison between the suitable choice and the romantic distraction. Actually, a new voice interjected, some of the most successful people I know started as artists. They turned to see a distinguished man in his 50s approaching their group. His expensive suit and confident bearing marked him as someone important. But there was something in his expression that seemed almost predatory. David Chen, the man said, extending his hand to Ethan. I don't believe we've been formally introduced, though I certainly know your work at Green Logic. Ethan's entire body tensed, and Zoe felt the shift immediately. David, he said carefully, I didn't expect to see you here tonight. Victoria was kind enough to invite me, David said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. I'm always interested in supporting good causes and meeting interesting people. His gaze shifted to Zoe. David Chen, CEO of Ecotech Industries. Zoe shook his hand, noting the way Ethan's jaw had tightened. She didn't know who David Chen was, but clearly his presence here was significant. Zoe Martinez, she said. I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with Ecotech Industries. We're in the same space as Green Logic, David explained. Clean energy, sustainable technology. You might say we're friendly competitors. Friendly? Ethan repeated, and there was nothing friendly in his tone. David's smile widened. Business is business, but there's no reason we can't be civilized about it. He turned back to Zoe. And you're an artist, I hear. How refreshing. Ethan always did have an eye for beauty. The comment was perfectly polite and completely inappropriate at the same time. Zoe felt like she was being evaluated as a piece of art herself, and she didn't like it. Beauty is subjective, she said. Coolly, what I try to capture is truth. Truth, David mused. Now that's a dangerous thing in a room like this. So many people here have built their lives on carefully constructed facades. He was looking directly at Ethan as he said it, and Zoe realized this was more than casual conversation. This was some kind of power play, though she didn't understand the rules. If you'll excuse us, Ethan said, his hand moving to guide Zoe away. I promised Zoe a dance. Of course, David said. Enjoy the evening. As they moved toward the dance floor, Zoe could feel multiple pairs of eyes watching them. Victoria, Rebecca, David, and probably others she hadn't noticed. The weight of their attention was almost physical. Who was that? She asked, as Ethan led her onto the dance floor. Someone who would love nothing more than to see me fail, Ethan replied, pulling her into his arms as the orchestra began a slow waltz. The dance of deception dancing with Ethan was nothing like Zoe had expected. She'd worried about stepping on his feet or looking awkward, but the moment his arms went around her, everything else faded away. He was an excellent dancer, confident and sure, and he guided her across the floor with an ease that made her feel graceful. You dance well, she said, surprised. Childhood lessons, he explained. My mother insisted. She said a gentleman should always know how to lead a lady properly. And do you? Lead properly, I mean? Ethan's eyes met hers, and for a moment, the pretense fell away completely. I'm still figuring that out. They moved together in silence for a few measures, and Zoe found herself hyper-aware of every point of contact between them. His hand was warm and strong on her back, his fingers intertwined with hers. And she could smell his cologne, something expensive and subtle that suited him perfectly. "You handled Rebecca well," Ethan said quietly. "She doesn't like me." "She doesn't." "No, there's a difference." Zoe looked up at him. "Does it matter? This is all temporary anyway." Something flickered across Ethan's face. "Right, temporary. Tell me about David Chen. He seemed to push your buttons." Ethan was quiet for a moment, guiding her through a turn before answering. "Ecotech is our biggest competitor. David's been trying to poach our clients and our staff for months. He's also been spreading rumors about Green Logic's financial stability. Is your company in trouble?" "Not yet, but we could be if we lose the Mitchell account. It's our biggest contract. And the client is starting to have doubts thanks to David's campaign of whispered concerns." Zoe felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. "And if your mother thinks your personal life is unstable, that gives him more ammunition." "Exactly." Ethan spun her out and back into his arms, the movement so smooth it seemed choreographed. "David's hoping that if he can raise enough questions about my judgment, Mitchell will jump ship to Ecotech. So I'm not just helping you avoid an unwanted engagement. I'm helping you save your company." "You're helping me protect something I've spent 3 years building," Ethan said, his voice intense. "Green Logic isn't just a business to me. A chance to actually make a difference, to help companies reduce their environmental impact while saving money. If David destroys that just to eliminate competition," he didn't finish the sentence, but Zoe could see the pain in his eyes. This wasn't about ego or pride. This was about purpose, about something bigger than himself. "And we better make sure he doesn't," she said firmly. Ethan looked down at her with surprise. I'm in this now, aren't I? Might as well see it through." Properly, the song ended, but neither of them moved to leave the dance floor. Other couples swirled around them, but Zoe felt like they were in their own bubble, separate from the rest of the world. "There's something I should tell you," Ethan said quietly. "What?" "This isn't how I expected tonight to go." "What do you mean?" Ethan hesitated, as if weighing his words carefully. "I thought this would be simple. Hire someone to play a part, get through the evening. Problem solved." "I didn't expect ... What? Didn't expect you to be so good at this. So real." Zoe felt her heart skip a beat. "Ethan ... I know," he said quickly. "I know, this is just business. I'm not trying to complicate things. It's just ... You should know that when I look at you right now, I'm not thinking about the money or the arrangement or any of it. I'm just thinking about you." The honesty in his voice was devastating. Felt herself leaning closer, drawn by something she didn't want to name. "That's dangerous," she whispered. "I know. We had a deal. I know that too." The orchestra began another song, and they started moving again, but the space between them had shifted somehow. The pretense was still there, the awareness that they were being watched, but underneath it was something else entirely. "Zoe," Ethan began, but he was interrupted by a tap on his shoulder. "Mind if I cut in?" David Chen asked, though he was all ready, positioning himself to take Ethan's place. Ethan's grip on Zoe tightened for a moment, and she could see the refusal forming on his lips. But they were in public, surrounded by important people, and making a scene would only hurt his cause. Of course, Ethan said with obvious reluctance, "I'll be right back." As David's arms went around her, Zoe felt immediately uncomfortable. Where? Ethan had been confident and respectful. David was possessive and presumptuous, holding her closer than appropriate and guiding her with unnecessary pressure. "You're quite the surprise," David said, as they began to move. "How so?" Ethan's always been so focused on business, I never expected him to fall for someone so ... He paused as if searching for the right word. "Artistic." "People contain multitudes," Zoe replied carefully. "Indeed they do." "Tell me, how long have you two been together?" It was the same question Victoria had asked, but coming from David, it felt like an interrogation. 6 months, Zoe answered, sticking to their established story. "And you met at a gallery opening?" Zoe's pulse quickened. Why did he know that? Had he been listening to their earlier conversations, or had he done research? Yes, she said simply. Gallery. This was dangerous territory. They hadn't established specifics beyond the basic story, and David was clearly fishing for inconsistencies. A small place in Soho, Zoe said, keeping her answer vague. I'm sure you wouldn't know it.
Try.
Me, I'm quite interested in art. Before Zoe could answer, she felt a familiar hand on her shoulder. Ethan had returned, and the look in his eyes was pure steel. Sorry to interrupt, he said, though he clearly wasn't sorry at all. But they're about to start the auction, and I promised Zoe we'd bid on something special. David stepped back with obvious reluctance. Of course, thank you for the dance, Zoe. I hope we have a chance to continue our conversation later. As they walked away, Ethan's hand was firm on her. Back. What did he want? He asked quietly. To ask questions about our relationship. Specific questions. Like which gallery we met at. Ethan cursed under his breath. He's fishing for holes in our story. Are you surprised? I should have expected it. David doesn't do anything without. An ulterior motive? They found seats at a table near the back of the ballroom as the auctioneer began presenting items for bid. Victoria waved them over to the family table, but Ethan shook his head slightly and guided Zoe to chairs that offered a clear view but some distance from the main action. We need to be more careful, he said quietly. David's going to try to trip us up, find some inconsistency he can use against us. Then we better get our story straight, Zoe replied. What's the name of the gallery where we met? They spent the next few minutes hurriedly filling in details, creating a more complete picture of their fictional relationship. The name of the gallery, the artist being featured, what Zoe had been wearing, how long they'd talked. With each detail, the lie became more elaborate and, paradoxically, more real. Lot 15, the auctioneer announced, a weekend at the Hamptons. Estate of Margaret Whitfield, including a private dinner prepared by a James Beard award-winning chef. That's the woman you impressed earlier, Ethan murmured. Should we bid? Why not? We're supposed to be a couple enjoying ourselves. The bidding started at $5,000 and quickly escalated. Zoe watched with growing amazement as people casually threw around more money than she made in a year. When the price hit $20,000, most bidders dropped out, leaving just two determined parties. $30,000, called a voice from across the room. $35, Ethan said calmly, raising his paddle. Zoe's eyes widened. Ethan, you don't have to. ... $40,000, came the counter bid. $50, Ethan replied without hesitation. The room went quiet. $50,000 for a weekend getaway was excessive even by these standards. The other bidder hesitated, then shook his head. Sold to bidder 47 for $50,000, the auctioneer announced, as applause filled the room. Zoe turned to Ethan in shock. You just spent $50,000 on a weekend trip. I spent $50,000 on making our relationship look real, he corrected. Couples who are serious about each other make big gestures. Plus, Margaret will remember this. It might help your career. The thought that he'd considered her career in his grand gesture made something warm unfurl in Zoe's chest. This was supposed to be about him, about his problems and his company, but he'd found a way to help her too. Thank you, she said softly. Don't thank me yet. We still have to survive the rest of the evening. But as they sat together in the elegant ballroom, surrounded by the glittering crowd, Zoe found herself thinking that surviving wasn't the problem anymore. The problem was that she was starting to enjoy this dangerous game far too much, and she was beginning to forget which parts were real and which were just for show. The morning after truth sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Ethan's penthouse apartment, casting long shadows across the hardwood floors. Zoe stood at the window, still wearing the emerald dress from the night before, watching the city wake up below. She felt like Cinderella after midnight, except the spell hadn't broken. If anything, it had grown stronger. The gala had ended near midnight, but she and Ethan had spent hours afterward walking through Central Park, talking about everything and nothing. They'd discussed art and business, dreams and fears, the weight of expectations and the courage it took to forge your own path. Somewhere between the boathouse and Bethesda Fountain, The lines between performance and reality had blurred beyond. Recognition? Coffee? Ethan's voice came from the kitchen, and Zoe turned to see him padding barefoot across the marble floor. His tuxedo jacket and tie discarded, his white shirt unbuttoned at the collar. He looked rumpled and human, and absolutely beautiful. "Please," she said, accepting the steaming mug he offered. Their fingers brushed as she took it, and she felt that same electric spark from the day before. "Any regrets?" he asked, settling beside her on the leather couch that probably cost more than her yearly rent. "About last night?" "No." She took a sip of coffee, gathering courage for what she needed to say next. "About what happens now. That's more complicated." Ethan was quiet for a moment, studying her face. "Margaret Whitfield called this morning. She wants to commission a portrait, a big one, for her corporate headquarters." "That's wonderful," Zoe said, and meant it. "Thank you for making that possible. I didn't do anything." You impressed her. "All on your own?" He paused. "There's something else," David Chen called too. Zoe's stomach clenched. What did he want? Congratulate me on my relationship and suggest that we have lunch to discuss some potential collaboration opportunities. Ethan's expression was grim. David doesn't collaborate. Conquers. If he's reaching out, it means he's planning something. Or maybe your performance last night convinced him that you're more stable than he thought. Maybe. But Ethan didn't sound convinced. "The problem is, if David starts digging into our relationship, really investigating, it won't take him long to figure out the truth." The truth, the word hung between them like a challenge. Zoe set down her coffee cup and turned to face him fully. "Is the truth, Ethan?" He met her gaze, and she saw her own confusion reflected in his green eyes. "I don't know anymore." Before she could respond, her phone buzzed with a text message. Then another and another. "What is it?" Ethan asked, noting her expression. Zoe scrolled through the messages, her heart sinking with each one. "It's my sister Sophia. She's seen the photos." "Photos?" Zoe turned her phone so he could see the screen. Someone had already posted pictures. From the gala online, society page photos showing her and Ethan dancing, bidding on auction items, looking for all the world like a couple madly in love. "Who is mystery woman who captured billionaire's heart?" Ethan read aloud from one of the headlines. "Billionaire. Apparently $50,000 for a weekend trip qualifies you as billionaire status in the gossip world." Zoe said weakly, "Sophia wants to know why I didn't tell her I was dating someone. And why that someone looks like he stepped off the cover of Fortune magazine." Ethan ran a hand through his hair. "This is getting complicated. It was always complicated. We just pretended it wasn't." Her phone rang, and Sophia's name flashed on the screen. Zoe looked at Ethan helplessly. "Answer it," he said. "But maybe don't mention the fake dating arrangement." Zoe accepted the call and put it on speaker. "Hi, Sophia. DeBella Martinez. What the hell's going on?" Sophia's voice filled the apartment, sharp with concern and curiosity. "I wake up too. See pictures of my sister on some society blog looking like a princess and apparently dating a tech mogul, and I'm finding out about it from the internet." "It's complicated," Zoe began. "Complicated how? Are you dating this guy or not? And don't you dare lie to me, Zoe. I can always tell when you're lying." Zoe looked at Ethan, panic rising in her chest. She'd been so focused on fooling his mother and his business rivals that she'd forgotten about her own family, the people who actually knew her well enough to see through any performance. "Yes," she said finally. "I'm dating him." It wasn't entirely a lie, was it? They were sitting together. In his apartment, still wearing clothes from their date, sharing coffee and intimate conversation. What did it matter that money had initially changed hands? "Thank God," Sophia said, her tone shifting to relief. "I was starting to worry you were going to die alone in that studio apartment, surrounded by paint tubes and empty ramen containers." "What's his name?" "Ethan Blake," Zoe said, watching his face carefully. "And he's good to you?" Zoe thought about the way he'd defended her art to Margaret Whitfield, how he'd made sure the auction bid would benefit her career. The hours they'd spent talking in the park like old friends discovering each other for the first time. "Yes," she said softly. "He's good to me." "Then I want to meet him. Sunday dinner. My place." "Don't even think about saying no." The call ended before Zoe could protest, leaving her and Ethan staring at each other in the sudden silence. "Sunday dinner?" Ethan said finally. "With my sister, her husband, and their 2 kids. It's in Queens. At a kitchen table that's probably older than you are." Zoe buried her face in her hands. "This is a disaster." "Why?" "Because Sophia will see right through us. She's known me my whole life, Ethan. She'll take one look at us together and know something's not right." "What if something is right?" The question was so quiet she almost missed it. When she looked up, Ethan was watching her with an expression she couldn't read. "What do you mean? I mean, what if we stop pretending this is just business? What if we see where this goes when it's real?" Zoe's heart hammered against her ribs. "Ethan, I know it's crazy. I know we barely know each other. But last night when we were dancing, when we were talking in the park, that wasn't fake, Zoe. Not for me." "It wasn't fake for me either," she admitted. "But that doesn't mean it's real. We're caught up in the drama, the excitement of playing these roles. What happens when the novelty wears off, and you remember that I'm a broke artist who lives in a 5th-floor walk-up? What happens when you remember that I'm a workaholic with controlling family and a company that might not survive the next 6 months?" They stared at each other, the weight of reality settling between them like a wall. "We're from different worlds," Zoe said finally. "So were Romeo and Juliet. That didn't end well for them." Ethan smiled, and despite everything, Zoe felt herself smiling back. Fair point. Yeah, but they had family feuds and poison. We just have logistics. The Sunday test, Sunday afternoon, found them standing outside a modest 2-story house in Queens. It's the kind of neighborhood where kids played soccer in the street and elderly women watched the world go by from front porch chairs. Zoe's stomach was in knots, and she could tell Ethan was nervous too, though he was trying to hide it. "Remember," she said as they walked up the front steps, "Sophia is protective. Miguel is suspicious of anyone who makes more money than a high school teacher, and the kids will ask you a million personal questions. Anything else I should know? Family is loud, opinionated, and they will absolutely interrogate you about your intentions toward me. Good thing my intentions are honorable." Zoe looked at him sharply, but before she could ask what he meant, the front door flew open and Sophia appeared. Zoe's older sister was small and fierce, with curly black hair and dark eyes that missed nothing. "Zoe." Sophia enveloped her in a hug that smelled like garlic and vanilla. "And you must be Ethan." Ethan extended his hand with a smile that was charming, but not too polished. "Mrs. Rodriguez, thank you for inviting me, Sophia, please. And any boyfriend of Zoe's family." Sophia's eyes were already cataloging everything about him, from his expensive but casual clothes to the way he stood. Protectively close to Zoe, they were ushered into a living room that was warm and cluttered in all the best ways. Family photos covered every surface, children's artwork decorated the refrigerator, and the smell of something incredible wafted from the kitchen. Uncle Miguel drew small tornadoes in the form of Sophia's children launched themselves at Ethan, apparently having decided he was worthy of immediate affection. "Kids, this is Ethan," Sophia corrected. "Tia, Zoe's boyfriend." 8-year-old Carmen studied Ethan with the intensity of a scientist examining a new species. "Are you rich?" she asked bluntly. Carmen Sophia scolded, but Ethan just laughed. "Do okay," he said, crouching down to her level. "Why do you ask?" "Because Tia Zoe is always eating ramen, and Mama says only poor people eat that much ramen." "Carmen has no filter," Sophia explained, looking mortified. "It's fine," Ethan assured her. "I like honest questions." He turned back to Carmen. "Your aunt eats ramen because she's an artist, and artists sometimes have to choose between buying food and buying paint. She always chooses paint because her art is important." Carmen considered this gravely. "Do you like her art?" "I think your aunt is incredibly talented. She sees things in people that nobody else notices, and she can put that on canvas in a way that makes you understand something true about them." Zoe felt her throat tighten. No, that wasn't a practiced answer designed to impress her family. That was what he really thought about her work. "Can you play video games?" 10-year-old Luis asked, apparently deciding that Ethan's artistic appreciation qualified him for the next level of evaluation. "I'm pretty good at them," Ethan replied, "though I haven't had much time to play lately. Want to see my new game?" Before anyone could object, Luis had dragged Ethan off to the family room. leaving Zoe alone with Sophia, who immediately pounced. "Okay, Spill," Sophia demanded, pulling Zoe into the kitchen. "How long has this really been going on?" "I told you, 6 months." "Bullshit." Sophia began aggressively chopping vegetables, a sure sign she was in interrogation mode. 6 months ago, you were crying over that jackass Marcus who dumped you for his yoga instructor. 6 months ago, you were swearing off men and saying you were going to focus on your art. Zoe's mind raced. She'd forgotten about Marcus, forgotten that Sophia would remember the timeline of her romantic disasters. "Things changed," she said weakly. "Things changed when? And why haven't I heard his name until now?" "You tell me everything, Zoe. You called me when you had food poisoning last month. You called me when your landlord raised your rent. Called me when you got that commission for the restaurant owner's portrait. But you're dating a gorgeous millionaire and you don't mention it once." "He's not a millionaire," Zoe protested. "Those shoes cost more than my car payment." "What? His watch is worth more than Miguel's yearly salary." "Don't insult my intelligence." Sophia pointed her knife at Zoe accusingly. "What aren't you telling me?" Before Zoe could answer, masculine laughter erupted from the family room, followed by Luis whooping in victory. Through the doorway, she could see Ethan and Miguel sitting on the couch, controllers in hand, engaged in some kind of racing game, while the kids provided running commentary. "He's good with them," Sophia observed, her tone softening slightly. "Yeah, he is. The way he looks at you." Sophia tilted her head, studying Zoe's face. "That's not fake, Mia. Whatever's going on, that man is crazy about you." Zoe felt her resolve crumbling. "It's complicated, Sophia. Love usually is. Did someone say love?" Miguel appeared in the kitchen doorway, having apparently lost the video game tournament. "Because if we're talking about love, I need a beer." Miguel Rodriguez was a bear of a man with kind eyes and the protective instincts of someone who'd grown up in a neighborhood where looking out for family meant everything. Taught high school mathematics and coached basketball, and he had the ability to spot a liar at 50 paces. "Ethan seems like a good guy," he said carefully, accepting the beer Sophia handed him. "But he's not exactly from around here." "Geography isn't a character flaw," Zoe replied. "Neither is money," Miguel agreed. "But sometimes people from different worlds want different things." "What does he want, Zoe?" It was such a simple question, but Zoe realized she didn't have a simple answer. What did Ethan want? A week ago, she would have said he wanted to save his business and avoid his mother's matchmaking. But now, "I think he wants the same thing I do," she said finally. "To build something real." Miguel and Sophia exchanged a look that said they were having an entire conversation without words. "Bring him around more often," Sophia said finally. "Let us get to know him, and let him get to know us," Miguel added. "If he's going to be part of this family, he needs to understand where you come from." Family. The word hit Zoe like a physical blow. They were talking about Ethan like he was a permanent fixture, like this was heading towards something lasting and meaningful. The problem was, she was starting to want that too. The moment of truth dinner was a revelation. Ethan fit into the Rodriguez family chaos, like he'd been born to it, helping Sophia serve, engaging Miguel in a passionate discussion about renewable energy education, and patiently explaining his job to the kids in terms they could understand. "So you make computers that help buildings use less electricity?" Carmen asked, frowning in concentration. "Sort of," Ethan said. "I make programs that help buildings be smarter about when they use electricity, so they don't waste it, like turning off the lights when you leave a room. Exactly like that, but for really big buildings with lots of rooms." "That's cool," Luis declared. "You're like a superhero for electricity." Ethan grinned. "I'll take that title." As they ate Sophia's incredible eras con palo, Zoe found herself watching Ethan carefully. There was nothing forced about his interactions with her family, nothing that seemed calculated or performed. He genuinely seemed to enjoy their company, and they clearly liked him too. "So, Ethan," Miguel said as they cleared the dinner plates. "What are your intentions toward our Zoe, Miguel?" Sophia protested, but Ethan held up a hand. "It's a fair question," he said, "and I appreciate you asking it directly." He looked across the table at Zoe, his green eyes serious. "I intend to treat her like the extraordinary woman she is. I intend to support her dreams and challenge her to reach for more than she thinks she can have. I intend to love her for as long as she let me." The silence that followed was deafening. Even the kids stopped chattering, sensing the weight of the moment. "Love her," Sophia repeated softly. Ethan never broke eye contact with Zoe. Yes, I love her," Ethan said, his voice steady and sure. "I know it's fast, I know it's complicated, but I've never been more certain of anything in my life." Zoe felt the world tilt on its axis. This wasn't part of their arrangement, wasn't part of any script they'd rehearsed. This was Ethan, in front of her family, declaring something that could change everything between them. "Tia, Zoe, are you crying?" Carmen asked with the brutal honesty of childhood. Zoe touched her cheek and found it wet. She hadn't even realized tears were falling. "I'm okay, baby." "Happy tears or sad tears?" Luis wanted to know. "I don't know yet," Zoe admitted, which made the adults laugh and seemed to satisfy the children's curiosity. Sophia reached across the table and squeezed Zoe's hand. "Why don't you two take a walk? Miguel and I will handle the dishes." "But we always help with dishes," Zoe protested weakly. "Tonight you have more important things to talk about," Sophia said firmly. 10 minutes later, Zoe and Ethan were walking through the quiet neighborhood streets as the sun set behind the row houses. Neither of them spoke for several blocks. The weight of his declaration hanging between them like a bridge neither was sure how to cross. "Did you mean it?" Zoe finally asked. "Which part?" "All of it. The loving me part, the supporting my dreams part, the wanting to be with me part." Ethan stopped walking and turned to face her under the glow of a streetlight. "Every word. When did you know?" "Honestly, I think I knew yesterday morning when I watched you get ready for your interview. You were so focused, so determined, so completely yourself. And I realized I didn't want to imagine my life without getting to see that every day." Zoe felt her heart hammering against her ribs. "Ethan, I need to tell you something." "What?" "I love you too." The smile that spread across his face was like sunrise. "Really? Really? And it terrifies me." "Why?" "Because this started as a lie. Because your mother will never approve of me. Because David Chen is going to try to destroy your company and I'll be another weapon he can use against you. Because I don't know how to be with someone who buys $50,000 weekend trips without blinking." Ethan stepped closer, his hands coming up to cup her face gently. "Those are all problems we can solve. The question is, do you want to solve them with me? What if we can't? What if this falls apart?" "Then it falls apart. But at least we'll know we tried." Zoe searched his eyes, looking for any hint of doubt or reservation. She found none. "Okay," she whispered. Okay, let's try. Let's see. What happens when we stop pretending and start building something real?" Ethan's kiss was soft and sure, full of promise and possibility. When they broke apart, Zoe felt like she was standing at the edge of a cliff, preparing to jump into something completely unknown. "So what now?" she asked. "Now we go back to your sister's house. We help with the dishes like proper family members. And we figure out how to make this work one day at a time. Tomorrow I take you to meet my father." Zoe's eyes widened. "Your father? If we're doing this for real, he should meet the woman I'm in love with. Besides, he's nothing. Like my mother, you'll like him." As they walked back toward the house, hands linked, Zoe felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Hope. Not the desperate hope of someone trying to survive, but the bright, warm hope of someone who had found something worth building a future. Around the new beginning, Monday morning arrived with a phone call that changed everything. Zoe was in her studio apartment, still glowing from the weekend's revelations, when her phone rang with an unknown number. "Miss Martinez, this is Amanda Ross from New York Society magazine. I was hoping we could talk." Zoe's stomach dropped. Amanda. Ross was known for her investigative pieces that often destroyed reputations and ended careers. "What about your relationship with Ethan Blake? I'm working on a story about sudden romances in high society, and yours has caught my attention." "I don't really have anything to say about my private life." "That's interesting because I have it on good authority that your relationship isn't exactly what it appears to be. In fact, I have evidence suggesting that Mr. Blake hired you to pose as his girlfriend at the charity gala." The blood drained from Zoe's face. I'm sorry, what? Hotel security footage? Financial records, witness statements. It's all very compelling. Of course, I'd love to hear your side of the story before I publish. Zoe's mind raced. How had Amanda Ross found out? Bud talked? I think there's been a misunderstanding, Zoe said carefully. Has there? Because I also have photos of you too. From yesterday's family dinner in Queens, and I have to say, you both look remarkably convincing for people who are supposedly faking a relationship. The threat was clear. Amanda Ross knew about both the original arrangement and the fact that something real had developed. She could destroy them either way by exposing the fake beginning or by suggesting they were still running a con. Do you want, Zoe asked, an exclusive interview? The real story, whatever that is? You have until tomorrow to decide, or I publish what I have. The line went dead, leaving Zoe staring at her phone in horror. She immediately called Ethan. We have a problem, she said, as soon as he answered. 20 minutes later. Ethan was pacing her tiny living room while Zoe sat on her second-hand couch, feeling like her world was collapsing. Amanda Ross is thorough, Ethan said grimly. If she says she has evidence, she has evidence. So what do? We tell the truth? Which truth? That we started fake and became real? That sounds like the worst romantic comedy plot ever. Ethan stopped pacing and looked at her. It sounds like our story, Ethan. If this comes out, it won't just hurt you. It'll destroy your company, your relationship with your mother, everything you've worked for. And if we lie, if we keep pretending, what kind of foundation is that for a real relationship? Zoe stared at him. You're serious. You want to tell a journalist that we started as a business arrangement? I want to tell a journalist that sometimes the best things in life begin in the most unexpected ways, that sometimes you have to take a leap of faith before you realize you can fly. That's very poetic, but your investors won't care about poetry when they're pulling their funding. Ethan sat down beside her, taking her hands in his. Zoe, I've spent my entire adult life trying to control how people perceive me, trying to manage my image and my reputation. And you know what? I'm tired of it. I'd rather lose everything being honest than keep everything by living a lie. Even if it means losing your company, even then. Besides, he smiled, I have faith in what we've built. Both the company and this relationship. If people can't see the value in either one, that's their loss. Zoe looked at their joined hands, thinking about everything that had brought them to this moment, the desperate proposition in a coffee shop, the magical evening at the gala, the way he'd fit so perfectly into her family, the moment when pretending had become the most real thing in her life. Okay, she said finally. Okay, let's tell our story, all of it. It's a messy, complicated, impossible, beautiful truth. Ethan lifted their joined hands and kissed her knuckles. Together? Together? The next morning, they sat across from Amanda Ross in the journalist's sleek office, the city sprawling beyond the windows like a promise of possibility. Amanda was younger than Zoe had expected, with sharp eyes and an expensive recorder that sat between them like a referee. So Amanda began, tell me how you really met. Zoe and Ethan looked at each other, sharing a smile that held all their secrets and all their hopes. It started with broken coffee mugs and a desperate man who needed someone to believe in him, Zoe said. And it became something neither of us expected, Ethan added. Love, they said together. And as they began to tell their story, the real story, with all its imperfections and impossibilities and stubborn, surprising truth, Zoe realized that sometimes the best things in life really did begin with someone brave enough to ask for help and someone crazy enough to say yes. 6 months later, the article would be titled, The Fake Girlfriend Who Became Real, a Modern Love Story. It would launch Zoe's career as a portrait artist and make Ethan's company a symbol of authentic success in a world obsessed with image. But more importantly, it would be the story they told their children years later about how love sometimes arrives disguised as something else entirely, and how the bravest thing you can do is choose truth over safety. Together over alone, and real over perfect. Their fake beginning had become the most genuine love story either of them had ever known.